Welcome back, everybody. We have a repeat reader today. I'm so excited. Today, we're going to be hearing from Amy Klco. You may have tuned in last time we heard Amy read. She read a really cool short story for us. Today, she's going to be reading from Mystekos Summer, which is a fantasy novel intended for ages 8 to 108 or older if you get to that point in life.
Yeah.
Welcome, Amy. Thanks for coming back.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
This is so much fun. I love this book. I'm going to gush a little bit because I love this book and I had so much fun reading it. And I think that not just children will love this book. I think, as you say, adults will also love it. It's so wonderfully connected to our childhoods.
Okay. Yeah.
It's so wonderfully, what's the word I'm looking for? Visiting the Wayback Machine, that thing.
Nostalgic? I don't know.
That's the word I was looking for.
Don't you hate when those words disappear?
Yeah, I'm a writer. I know how to do these things. Okay, so thank you so much for coming back. I know that it was like trial by fire the first time around.
It was great.
So I appreciate it. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you.
Okay.
Amy Klco wrote her first book in 4th grade when she was only 10. The book, Where Am I?, won 2nd place in a writing competition in school. And on that day, Amy decided that she wanted to be a writer. And oh my gosh, we're so thankful. It's taken her years of writing and learning and dreaming, but now she has 8 books published. Is that number right?
Yes, I forgot. Yes, I do now have 8. Yep.
4 of which are in the Mystekos Fantasy Series, which she's going to be reading today. Amy has a bachelor's degree in English and art, as well as a master's degree in education, literacy, and special education. Like, she's not ambitious enough. She is also a national board certified teacher. She's been a middle school and high school teacher for the past 15 or so years, where she has seen young people struggle with bullying, learning to accept themselves for who they really are, and even dealing with the death of their parents. All of these experiences, in addition to her own, are woven into her stories. She currently lives in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where she likes to spend as much time as she can outdoors, communing with the trees, the stars, the birds, and the lakes. It is through nature that she has been able to discover the answers to questions like why and how, why things happen the way they do, and how we can find meaning in the bad things that happen in our lives. For Amy, the answer is to help others. And the best way she knows how to help others is through her writing. And again, we are so grateful. So cool. You bring such wonderful story to us, and I'm really pleased to have you back. Instead of reading the book synopsis, I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about the book and the series so that those young people who are hearing about it for the first time will have a little bit of a better understanding of what they're going to be getting into.
Okay. So the whole concept of the series is about a girl named Emily Moss. Her mother, we find out at the very beginning, and you'll hear that today, the very beginning, we find out that her mother is dying. And the whole thing is kind of about her learning how to deal with that fact. She wants to be there, of course, to help her mother, but her mother says, no, you need to go to this camp, Camp Tenderheart. It was a camp that I went to as a kid, and I want you to have this experience as well. So go ahead and go to this camp. I'll be okay, you know. She doesn't want to go, but she goes anyway because her mom wants her to. Well, she's there. She makes a lot of friends at camp, but then she also one night goes out for a walk and discovers this necklace. And when she puts the necklace on, she sees this bridge and
magical things happen.
And magical things happen, exactly.
So much fun. This is such a great book. I loved it, and okay, I'm gushing again. Okay, so Diana's going to let Amy read because this is why we have Amy on the program today. So, Amy, I would love it if you would read aloud for us, and we'll talk again after.
Sounds great. Well, I'm going to start right at the beginning with this book, and we'll just kind of see how far we get, and then we can talk about after, like you mentioned. So here we go. So, prologue. Help me, a voice called out, waking me up in the middle of the night. I shot up in bed, blinking, trying to adjust my eyes to the darkness, trying to bring my thoughts back to reality. But the dream world held on. I could still picture the scene in my head. A large room, high ceilings, columns on either side. At the front of the room, a woman sat on a throne. A woman who looked like, was that me? And then a dragon burst into the room, and the dream faded away and reality came back. I was not some queen living in a castle. I was just me, quiet Emily Moss from boring old Michigan, where nothing magical ever happened. I got out of bed then, my mind racing too much to go back to sleep. Instead, I pulled out my journal and began to write. Many girls dream of being in a fairy tale, living in a magical land with castles and dragons, a handsome prince, and happily ever after. But most of them seem to forget that fairy tales often start off unhappily. In that way, at least, my story is like a fairy tale. My mother is dying. She's been dying for a long time, as long as I can remember. When I was younger, I didn't realize that anything was wrong. That was just the way she was. But as I got older, I began to realize that she is different from other mothers. Instead of expecting her to take care of me, I needed to take care of her, to do whatever I could to protect her from all pain. Even though I couldn't do much, I was determined to do what I could. I still am. Nobody can figure out what's wrong with her. All we know is that she's been sick for years, some mysterious disease that is slowly eating away at her from inside, causing her to grow old before her time. Whenever she sees another doctor, we tell ourselves that this will be the one who can finally figure it out and help Mom stop aging. And every time, we're wrong. Instead, she just gets older and weaker. But this time may be different. She's got this new doctor who wants to try an experimental procedure on her. He thinks it'll stop her rapid aging. I hope he's right, because something inside me knows that if the doctor can't cure her this time, that'll be the end of it. She's just too weak to fight anymore. Of course, we never say our fears aloud, me or my dad. We each like to pretend we don't know what's really happening. We act like everything is fine, that she's on her way to recovery. But I think we both know the truth. Having me go to Camp Tenderheart is Mom's idea. She used to go there every summer when she was younger. She even worked as a counselor there, her and her twin sister, Linda. That is, until they were 18, when Aunt Linda ran away. Or I should say, when Mom convinced everyone that Aunt Linda ran away. Mom never told anyone what really happened to her, not even Dad. We never talk about Aunt Linda, just as we never talk about Mom's illness, but her presence is always there. It was after Linda's disappearance that Mom's health started to fail. She was still healthy when she married my dad, her high school sweetheart, and when she had me. There was just a few hints of early aging, a few stray wrinkles and gray hairs. But that aging process just kept going. She had me when she was 21. Now, 15 years later, she looks old enough to be my grandmother, perhaps even my great-grandmother. My dad is convinced that Mom's illness is somehow related to Linda's disappearance, that maybe Mom feels guilty about what happened to her sister, and that the guilt is what is eating away at her. But there's got to be something more than that. I just wish I knew what. I wish I knew how I could save her. Instead, they're sending me away, sending me off to camp where all the trouble started, right when Mom needs me the most. The camp has a special group called the No-Jimbos. Jimbo is an Ojibwe word, an Ojibwe word for healing. But I know the truth. This group is for kids whose parents are sick, possibly even dying. I do not want to be a part of that group. The special group just happens to be offered the same time Mom is going in for this new experimental procedure. I'm sure they planned it that way. I know Mom worries about me, about how I'm coping with all of this. I don't want her to worry about me. She has enough to think about as it is. If going to this camp will help Mom relax a little, I'll do it. Still, that doesn't make it any easier. I don't want to go to camp. I want to be with her. She needs me. She needs me because no one else understands what she's going through the way I do. Who else can she talk to about how scared she is? Who else can she share the little things with, like how she hates hospital food and how she gets scared at night when the hospital gets dark? She tries to put on a brave face when Dad is around because she doesn't want him to worry any more than he already does. I'm the only one she can really share her fears with. And now, when she needs me most, I'll be sent away? Still, it's just for a week. What can happen in 1 week? That's what I wrote before leaving for Camp Tenderheart the summer I turned 15. Now, I'm going to tell you what can happen in a week, about what happened to me. I'm going to tell you of another world. Chapter 1. Right before I left for camp, Mom told me Aunt Linda's story. I was sitting on her bed. We were playing cards and she was winning. Then, in the middle of a hand, she set her cards down. I thought perhaps she was getting tired, but when I asked, she just shook her head. She pushed a strand of short white hair back from her face. Normally, she always kept it in careful place, but today it stuck up in all directions. She didn't even seem to notice, like her mind was elsewhere. I thought back to when her hair had been black, like mine. That was when I was really young. Over the years, it had grown whiter and whiter until there was no black left at all. But in my mind, she still had beautiful, long black hair, like the pictures I'd seen of her when she was a girl. Maybe that's why I always kept my hair long. I wore it in 2 long braids, even though that style was rather old-fashioned. I didn't care. It was a connection I had with my mother. She used to wear it that way when she was a girl. Mom would always have 2 braids, and Linda would have 1. My grandma once explained to me that sometimes the only way to tell them apart, at least by looks, was the hair. Their personalities, I guess, were quite different. After Linda left, Mom cut her hair short and has kept it short ever since. But as for me, I like to keep mine long. I want to tell you something, Emily, Mom said to me. I looked into her bright blue eyes that I knew looked exactly like my own. This is something I've never told anyone, not even your father, but it's something I think you need to know, or you will need to know, perhaps really soon. I snuggled in close to her. It all happened when your Aunt Linda and I were working as counselors at Camp Tenderheart, Mom told me, and I tried to hide my surprise at hearing Aunt Linda's name. It was a Saturday, our day off. 1 day a week, there were no campers around. Sometimes those were the best days of all, but this time it was the worst. Mom paused for a minute, as if checking to make sure no one could hear us. All we could hear was Dad downstairs making dinner. That seemed to reassure her, and she went on. We went for a walk that afternoon, a long walk. I didn't know that Linda was following me, so that's why I didn't realize at first that she hadn't come back. It wasn't until that night that people started asking where she was, when we all realized she wasn't with us. She paused again, lost in thought. She began running a finger just below her collarbone at the base of her neck. She had a habit of tracing her fingers along an invisible pattern that only she knew, whenever she thought no one was watching. We were all very worried, she continued. Some of us went out that night to look for her. The next morning, as soon as the sun was up, we went out again, but no one could find any trace of her until... She paused, taking a painful breath. Something inside me told me to take the path I had the day before. And there, hanging on the first post of the bridge to Willow Point, I found it, a warm fuzzy I'd given to Linda the day before. What's a warm fuzzy? I asked. Warm fuzzies are one of the best parts of camp, Mom said and smiled. They're basically like pom-poms made out of yarn with a long string on it so you could wear it around your neck. But the thing about warm fuzzies is that you can't keep them for yourself. You have to give them to somebody else. She paused for a minute, as if lost in thought. She seemed to be trying to convince herself to continue. I gave that warm fuzzy to Linda as a peace offering, she continued. She was mad at me about, we were fighting over a boy. This boy sent me a letter while we were at camp. Linda thought that letter and the boy should have been hers. I gave her the warm fuzzy to show her that she meant more to me than any boy ever would. Mom brushed away a tear. When I saw that warm fuzzy placed on the post as if it had been put there deliberately, I knew it was a sign that only I would understand. That's when I realized where she was and that she could never come back. Then, speaking more to herself than me, Mom added, I could find the warm fuzzy, but I couldn't find the necklace anywhere. I couldn't bring Linda home. Mom wiped a tear from her eye. They closed camp for a few days while we all continued to search every acre. I knew I had to do something before the camp was closed forever. Mom looked at me, and there was a strange look in her eyes. It was as if she was trying to confess to something horrible she'd done. After a long pause, she continued. That's when they found the note that said that Linda was leaving camp, was leaving her family, was leaving everything. It said she didn't want anyone looking for her. She was going away. Mom looked at me again and tried to smile. Your grandmother wanted to get the police involved. Do you remember how insistent your grandma used to be when she wanted to? I smiled, remembering my grandmother, who died a few years earlier. But Linda wasn't a missing child. Since she was 18, the police explained, if she wanted to leave home, she was old enough to legally do so. Grandma didn't like that answer, but there was not much she could do. Mom stopped talking and was silent for a long time. I started to wonder if she'd fallen asleep. I was about to quietly get up and let her be when she spoke again. I wrote that note, she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. She was my sister, and I knew her handwriting very well. It was easy to fake it. She looked at me, and that pleading look was on her eyes again. I had to, for everyone. I knew they would never find her, and I didn't want them to have to search forever. But there was no way to tell them what had happened. I reached out to touch Mom's frail arm. What did happen, Mom? I asked. But she just shook her head and started to cry, uncontrollable sobs. I didn't mean to, she kept saying in between her tears. I never meant to. I began to wonder what could possibly have happened that would have upset Mom this much. What had she seen? What had she done? But with her crying so hard, she couldn't say more. Dad must have heard Mom crying because he came up to see if she was okay. Mom quickly pulled herself together as soon as she saw him. I'm fine, Sam, she told him. I'm just going to miss our little Emily this week. I don't have to go, I told her. I can stay here with you. I want to stay with you. No, she responded, with more force than I would have expected. You have to go to Camp Tenderheart. You have to go now. They need you. I'll be fine. My father reached out to smooth Mom's hair. It's okay, Mandy, he told her. She's all set to go. She'll have a good time, and she'll be back before we can even miss her. My mother smiled peacefully. Then she closed her eyes and calmly fell asleep. Chapter 2. I'm going to do a little bit of chapter 2, I think, too.
Okay, great. I could listen to the whole book. Keep going.
Okay. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking over what Mom had told me, and more importantly, what she had not told me. Where was Aunt Linda, and why couldn't she come back? Dad dropped me off at camp just in time for me to put my things in the cabin before where I'd be staying, and then head to the main building, the lodge, for dinner. Everyone else was already inside, so I had to walk into a room full of people I didn't know and try to figure out where I should be. I didn't want to. I didn't like going into new situations where I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I had to. I took a deep breath, opened the door to the lodge, and walked in. It was a big room filled with long tables and benches, and squeezed into every bench were kids, all talking, all making noise. I felt totally overwhelmed. I wanted to turn around and run back to the cabin, or better yet, just go back home. No, I told myself firmly in my head. You can handle this. Just find someone who seems to know what they're doing. Mom wants you here. She knows you can handle it. Excuse me, I said to the first grown-up I saw. I'm Emily Moss. I'm not sure where I should be. Emily, the woman said with a warm smile on her face, I'm so glad you made it. I'm Chris. I'll be your counselor for the week. Here, have a seat. She motioned to the place on the bench right next to her. This is Cindy, Allison, and Rachel, she added, gesturing to the girls sitting next to her. They're all Najimos too. Rachel gave me a shy smile. The other girls nodded to me and kept talking. I'll introduce you to each one of them once we get back to the cabin, Chris continued. But for now, let's eat. I hope you're hungry, she added, passing me a large bowl of mashed potatoes. I ate my food in silence, not quite sure what to say. Allison and Cindy were busy talking to each other. Apparently, they'd been here before, because they were swapping stories of their past trips. It sounded like fun. But I don't want to have fun, I reminded myself. I'm only here because Mom wants me to be here. All I have to do is get through this week, and then I can go back and be with her again. After dinner was over, we cleaned up and headed back to the cabin. Once we got back there, Chris had us sit in a circle on the cement floor so we could get to know each other. We had to tell our names and a bit about why we were there. In other words, we had to tell about our sick parents. The girl with the wavy blonde hair went first. My name is Allison, she told us, and this is my 5th year coming here. My dad has bone cancer. They originally told him he only had a year to live. He's made it 7 already and is still going strong. He's a tough guy. Chris smiled. We're glad to have you back, Allison, she said, and I'm happy to hear that your dad is still doing so well. I quietly listened to the other girls' stories. Cancer, heart attack, Parkinson's disease. I felt bad for them, for what they were going through, what they must still be going through. But I was also dreading my own turn. What would I say? I didn't have a simple way to explain my mom's illness. All I had was a mystery. Then Rachel told her story. In a very quiet voice, she began. This is my first time here, she told us. My mom died last year. They never figured out what was wrong with her. When she first got sick, she would find herself getting out of breath for no reason. It got worse until she could barely breathe at all. Then one day she just stopped breathing altogether. Rachel took a deep breath herself, trying to keep from crying. We all sat there in silence, not sure what to say. They still don't know what it was, she finally continued in her soft voice. The doctors told my dad it was just something that happened sometimes. But why did it have to happen to my mom? Tears started rolling down her cheeks, and without even thinking about it, I went over and put my arms around her, letting her cry on my shoulder. She stopped crying after a moment. I'm sorry, she said. It's still hard to think about. I just wish I knew why it had happened. If I just knew why, maybe I could deal with it better. But as it is... She stopped talking and wiped away another tear. I know how you feel, I told her. Nobody knows what's wrong with my mom either. She just keeps aging really fast and nobody can figure out why. I think I've heard of that, Chris volunteered. Isn't there a disease where people's aging is increased? What's that called? I shook my head. Warner syndrome, I explained. That's what the doctors thought at first. But after they did more tests, they said it couldn't be. They said something about her skin being too tight and face not looking right. I'm not sure what it meant. No, this is something else. I just wish I knew what it was. I wish I knew how to save her. There was a long silence. Nobody knew what to say. Finally, Chris told us about her father, who had died of Huntington's disease when she was 10, and her brother, who is currently battling with it. It's a genetic disease, she explained. Any one of us kids could have gotten it, or could still get it. The symptoms usually don't show up until the person is in their 20s or 30s. It was hard when I was younger, watching my father go through it. He slowly lost control of his body until he couldn't walk and could barely talk. And there was nothing any of us could do to make it better. Chris stopped talking for a moment, and I wondered if she too was going to start crying. And now, she finally continued, I have to watch my brother go through the same thing. Still, she added in a lighter tone, one thing this disease has taught me is to enjoy life while I can, find the good in life and live it to its fullest. For example, she added as she stood up, we can go right now and enjoy the opening campfire.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Now I have to go back and read the whole book again.
Okay. I was thinking the same thing, so I think I'll read it again.
So I have two questions. The first one is, we talked before we started the recording tonight about how there was a purpose in you writing these books. I'd like you to share that with our audience if you could.
Sure, there's several purposes, but one of the purposes, because I am an English teacher, I've worked a lot with at-risk students and students who struggle with reading. And I wanted to make a book or a series of books that could be read by any reader. I know part of it, I struggled when I was young with reading until I found books that I loved. And so the idea was to have books that could be read, they're written basically at like a 5th grade level, but the story itself captures anybody from 5th grade on up, obviously up through adult, and there's different levels that you can read it on.
Sure.
So it's written with that. Another thing, a couple things that I did, it does have illustrations in it.
And they're beautiful. They're gorgeous.
They are. I had Dan Bellini did the illustrations for this book, and I really love, it was so neat to see the story come to life in the pictures.
Yeah, I love the art. They're so gentle. I just
Yeah.
love them. Yeah.
The other thing that I did was I made the chapters short. And, as I was working on the manuscript, I had lots of people say, these chapters are too short. You can't have these chapters this short. But it stuck with them. Like, no, they're done on purpose, because especially if a struggling reader is reading this, they can be like, look, I've already got through 10 chapters. I'm just flying through this. So they feel that accomplishment.
Well, I have to say too, as an adult reading it, it was really nice to say to my husband, well, I read 4 chapters tonight.
Exactly.
That was kind of fun. So
it's good for all of us to feel like, yeah, look at all these chapters.
Even as a 50+ adult, it was really nice to, it's good to read stuff that makes you feel good about your ability.
Exactly. And then you think, oh, I could read this, I could read another book, and and then all of a sudden you're a reader. And then you're a writer. It happens.
It's about building skills, right? And
exactly.
if you start with something that you enjoy, building the skills become that much more fun.
And if you start with something you can be successful on, you're going to enjoy it more. And
absolutely.
Exactly. Yep.
So while we're on the theme of enjoyment, what was your favorite part about writing this first book in the series?
I think my favorite part, obviously with this book and with the whole series, was creating the world and just learning as I went. Oh yeah, there's this, and understanding the whole world. We didn't quite get to it, but she does end up in a kind of fantasy type world. And so to create that world was really fun, challenging. And I don't know that I'll ever do it again, but it was cool to create this world and know that it's out there now in the world, so to speak. So.
Right. Well, the thing that I love about it is that you have left some tremendous opportunities for young people to try their hand at fan fiction, right? We know as authors in the community, fan fiction is where you take a piece of somebody else's work and you build on it and kind of turn it into something a little bit different, something that becomes your own. People do it with the animation world quite a bit, and with some other really known Twilight and some of those other things. But what I found in this book was that it's a wonderful opportunity to invite young people to say, so there might be a hole or a crack here that you might be able to create something different or new or parallel to what's going on. So I don't mean to turn your novels into writing adventures for children, but I found that with this book, it's that opportunity is very cool for young people.
Well, and I will give you a spoiler that's okay, because the very end of the series ends with the end, or is it? this is the end of my telling of the story, but I want to hear your stories.
See, I did not know this, and I figured it out.
Yep, it very much is. Please, and I actually have had a couple people share their fan fiction on the story, which is super excitingly cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know that you'd already visited the idea of fan fiction when I brought it up today. I thought I was being clever.
Well, you are.
Not being clever.
Yes, always clever, but.
Thank you so much, Amy, for coming back and reading again. I look forward to having you back again to read the next book.
Yes, there's 4 of them. So,
what's the title of the second book in the series?
The second book is Mystekos Fall. So there's 4 books. There's fall, summer, fall, winter, and then of course we end with the spring and new birth and growth and stuff. So
very cool. I'm so looking forward to you coming back. We're going to make this a regular thing until we get through all of the books.
Sounds great.
So I'm so excited. Thank you again for all you do for young people and for supporting the written word. I'm honored to know you.
I'm honored to be able to do all I can do to do all those things. So yes.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Thanks.